Welcome, everyone. I'm William Henry. Today, I'm going to be talking about Mary Magdalene and the throne of the Second Coming. As many of you know, we're in a major resurgence of interest in Mary Magdalene around the world. And I'm going to talk just for a moment about, in part, why that is and what it ultimately means. Then we'll get into my presentation. So first, I just want to acknowledge I just completed my 30th pilgrimage to Mary Magdalene territory in southern France, the pilgrimage trail through the Languedoc in the Cathar country over to St. Baume and St. Marie de la Mer. I first visited there in 1996. I had just written my first book. I had spent over 10 years or so researching the whole Holy Blood, Holy Grail, mysteries of Mary Magdalene ideas, and finally made it to southern France, finally made it to that hilltop village, Rennes-le-Château, the center of the Magdalene mysteries in the Languedoc. And as I was thinking about my journey while I was there in June, again, 30 years on, I had no idea when I first set foot there in 1996 that I would continue to go back, and hundreds of people would ultimately go with me on these pilgrimages. And back then, Magdalene was a huge part of it. She's always been a major component of the mysteries in southern France. But back then, the women that I were meeting along the trail, they tended to be academic, but also very earthy. They were very land-oriented. The message for them from Mary Magdalene was in the waters, in the sacred waters of this area. Magdalene was called the mistress of the waters. And so the women tended to be very earthy, goddess-oriented, getting out into nature and feeling the vibe and the energy of the place. And a lot of that then changed about 10 years later with the publication of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, which turned southern France into an absolute, a circus is a good way to describe it. That tiny hilltop village, Rennes-le-Château, might have seen, say, 50,000 visitors a year from 1996 to 2006. And then suddenly, after Da Vinci Code, there's a couple 100,000 people that have descended on this hilltop village, and they're all wanting to get the mysteries of the Holy Grail, the Knights Templar, Mary Magdalene, lost secrets of Jesus. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And what Da Vinci Code spawned was a kind of a period where we went through a lot of fictionalizations of Mary Magdalene. Authors started writing these fictional accounts, often kind of disguising themselves as Mary Magdalene in their works. It was a little bit different because you had to sort of navigate through there. Some of these authors were really quite territorial. If you talked about something they wrote about in their book, they kind of maintained that they had ownership and that was their territory and you couldn't infringe on it. It was kind of weird in a way. It was unfortunate because it led to some real dissension, but we got through it. And then things shifted again after, say, 2020. We get into the social media era, Facebook, Instagram kick in. And suddenly now there's a deluge of people coming into southern France, and it's a little bit different. They're geared towards the social media kind of aspect of it. One of the welcome aspects of this is that suddenly the very earthy, land-oriented kind of divine feminine individuals turned into goddesses, and they're wearing these incredible outfits everywhere they go. I mean, they're really dressing up. The ritual became super important. It's still super important. The land is still important too, but it became more about presentation and style. And it's to the point now where some people don't like that. I'm part of a group that comments on these tours and journeys, pilgrimages into southern France. And now, mind you, for the first, say, 20 years or so that have been leading these pilgrimages and tours, I'd say there may be 50 of us that were regularly, annually bringing pilgrims to this area and working in this area. This group that I'm part of has 50,000 members, and they did a call out last year to all those tour offerers or people offering tours to this area. There were 250 that registered. I wasn't one of them. And that tells me that maybe there's like 500 women now, mostly women, who are leading pilgrimages to southern France that are themed around Mary Magdalene and the real mysteries of Mary Magdalene. And some of the old timers are getting a little bit cranky maybe about it, because to them, it's very ungrounded. It's divorced from history, almost as if history is a secondary aspect of us. There's something else that's going on here with the Magdalene frequency or Magdalene vibe. I have noticed it. I mean, this is easily my third wave of major ascendancy of Magdalene energies. And this wave is not a wave. It's a tsunami. Something is going on. And that's part what I wanted to comment on here, that I'm generally supportive of it. I mean, I get it. Some of what's being offered in the name of Mary Magdalene is so ungrounded, it's practically satire. It's comedic in a way, but that's okay, because we're still in the Magdalene vibe is the idea. Something is evolving. Maybe you want to even go so far as to say it's a revolution in Magdalene studies. And it's very much, in my opinion, like what happened with the Giza Plateau last year in 2025, when there was the announcement by Philip Abandi and his team with the SARS research, the satellite aimed at the Giza Plateau, and they maintained that they had discovered this vast underground city, the Halls of Amenti, underneath the Giza Plateau, and showed these dramatic AI-generated images of what they proposed the SARS technology is shown as beneath the Giza Plateau. And then they said that this proves that what is in the book, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, is actually accurate and true. And the first time I heard that, I just kicked a little bit, because the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean is not an ancient text. It was channeled, in the 1930s by Maurice Doreal. He claims Thoth told him about this repository in the Hall of Records, and it's Atlantean and all of this. And people, including some of these scientists, took this as an actual, factual, ancient text. It's not. It's new. It's from the 20th century. It was channeled. And nothing wrong with channeled material, but it's not a historical text from, say, 300 BC, like maybe, or even 200 AD, like the Corpus Hermeticum and some of the other Hermetic texts. And my remark then, initially, was that, hey, if you're citing the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, that to me, as the source for identifying what's underneath the Giza Plateau, it's almost like saying you have found Tony Stark's secret library. Tony Stark is a comic book character from the Marvel Universe. He's Iron Man. He does not exist in the real world. So if I'm saying I'm on a quest to find Tony Stark's library, you'd think I'm kind of like nuts. This is fantasy. And this is the way the announcement of the discovery of the Halls of Amenti, based on the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, which is a channeled book from the 1930s that has no historical validity. You're going, what's going on here? But then I kind of backed up and looked at it from another perspective and said, well, maybe Thoth intended it to be this way. Who knows? Maybe the Corpus Hermeticum from the ancient world was also channeled work, and maybe it was viewed with derision, like a comic book in the ancient world. But it has validity because it stood the test of time. And perhaps Thoth did speak with Maurice Doreal and tell him things that were unknown, because there's a continuing revelation that's unfolding on the Giza Plateau, and you and I are witnessing that. So I come back over here to the Magdalene side, and I have that same kind of open-minded perspective. Who's to say that Mary Magdalene isn't speaking through one of these thousands of women in particular, or perhaps many of these thousands of women that are now embracing the Magdalene archetype, the Magdalene frequency or energy, and that she's now offering a new revelation that is, in fact, divorced from the original teaching from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene 2,000 years ago. What if we are now experiencing this new revelation, and we're supposed to be on the lookout, aware of new ideas and inspirations coming from the Magdalene? Well, my perspective is this, that, well, if there is this incredible tsunami of interest in a Magdalene rising, thousands of women, it's probably tens of thousands of women, maybe hundreds of thousands of women in particular, around the world, men too, are embracing the teachings of Mary Magdalene and receiving new revelations from the Magdalene. If that is the case, then what if Magdalene's presence on our planet in this incredibly dramatic way right now has something to do with Jesus? If Magdalene is there and speaking, is it common sense or sensical to at least ask, propose, maybe she's here to herald the arrival of her koinona, her spiritual companion, maybe her husband, perhaps at one time the father of her children, the leader of her church. She's his chief apostle. So what if Mary Magdalene's presence is now being felt on the planet because this is a step toward what millions, if not billions of people anticipate as a second coming of the Christ, the first appearance of the Messiah in the Jewish tradition? If that is the case, then what I'm suggesting today and offering to the Magdalene community is that if you are plugged into the Magdalene archetype, she has a job. She has a job in prophecy. This is a job, a role that has developed over centuries. It goes beyond sacred texts. It goes into sacred art. It goes into belief about who she is and what she was going to do at the time of the second coming. And what I'm going to share with you now is, as I mentioned, a presentation called Mary Magdalene and the Throne of the Second Coming. And I'm going to propose to you what I see as the role of the Magdalene at the time of the second coming. So I'm going to go ahead and drop into my presentation now and explore this concept with you. So let's begin in 2009. Let's begin in Magdala, a tiny fishing village on the shores of the Sea of Galilee that is the home of Mary Magdalene. And in 2009, on this dot of real estate that we're looking at in this photo, the locals had intended to build a shopping mall. They called in archaeologists to take a final look before they plowed over or plowed under everything here and built this shopping mall. As they're excavating this site or doing this work, in the back of their mind is the recognition that Jesus lived and taught in a local synagogue in Capernaum on the Sea of Galilee. And it is believed that this synagogue in Magdala, which is what we're looking at here, this site is the site of a synagogue, is where Jesus actually taught. In the book of Matthew, it says, "And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is upon the seacoast in the borders of Zabulon and Naphtali." Then we learn Jesus and his companions went into Capernaum, and straightway on the Sabbath day he entered into the synagogue and taught. The people were astonished at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority, not as the scribes. And so here they are excavating the site of a synagogue in Magdala, and they come upon a stone that is buried in the ground. Along with the stone, they find various mosaics as well. And they readily recognize that this is almost something that is totally lost. If they were to build a shopping center on top of this, they never would have discovered this incredible stone we're about to talk about. And here it is here. They suddenly discover this buried just underneath the surface of the ground, and they pull it out. It's now called the Magdala Stone. And it has some astonishing information encoded within it that is going to drive our conversation today. The long side of the stone depicts the side of a building with pillared archways, with three-dimensional design to create the illusion of appearing inside a temple. This stone, says Dina Gorney, she's one of the archaeologists working on the site, she said, this stone is really unique. We've never excavated anything like it. And she goes on to say, it took me 3 days to believe what I was seeing, that we are standing in a synagogue from the time that the temple in Jerusalem was functioning, the Temple of Solomon, the second temple, the one refurbished by King Herod. And she goes on to say that stone had power. You could feel it. And that's a profound acknowledgement from a mainstream typically trained archaeologist to say that she's got her hands on a stone from the time of Jesus and Mary Magdalene and that it had power you could feel. That's highly, highly provocative. She says, we abandoned all the other areas and began digging here, and everything was near the surface, and everything was from the 1st century. So this ancient stone of secrets is believed to be a miniature of the Temple of Solomon, or possibly something else, which we'll get to in a moment. It sits at the intersection of Jewish and Christian history, that Second Temple period. Jesus threw the money changers out of that same temple. The Essenes had formerly practiced at that same temple. The Mother Mary was raised in that same temple. And what they're saying here is that this stone is a miniature version of the Temple of Solomon. There's nothing else like it anywhere in ancient Israel. And it features the oldest representation of a menorah from the Temple of Solomon ever found. And scholars believe this teaching stone effectively is a portable Temple of Solomon. So let's talk about that temple just for a moment, because what they're saying is that some artist at the time of Jesus made a stone that is a miniature version of the temple itself, or if not the temple, it's thought it could be a miniature version of the Holy of Holies of the Temple of Solomon. As a high priest after the order of Melchizedek, Jesus would have been intimately familiar with the workings of the temple, and in particular, the Holy of Holies within the temple. This is where, in the original temple, the Ark of the Covenant was housed. This is the place where the Israelite high priest would interact with the Old Testament God Yahweh, who would sit on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. This holy place is a golden cube-shaped room that was concealed by a veil that was 3 feet thick, it was 300 men to carry it. It was woven or repaired by the Virgin Mary. It's highly mysterious. And to cut to the chase, this golden cube-shaped room, I say it's golden because its walls are covered with gold, and it's imagery reflecting that it's an echo of the Garden of Eden, that this golden cube-shaped room, the Holy of Holies, effectively operated as a portal or a gateway. When the high priest entered into this realm or entered into this cube-shaped room and sat on the mercy seat of the ark, they could be transported into higher consciousness realms or even higher dimensional realms. They could receive knowledge. They could then bring that knowledge into the material plane. And in this image here, you clearly see the menorah sitting on top of an Ark of the Covenant-like platform, sitting in between 2 pillars. And what we're asked here to believe is that at this synagogue in Magdala, at the time of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, someone created a miniature of the Holy of Holies of the First Temple and brought it out to Magdala. And I'm here showing you an image of the Ark of the Covenant for reference, because one of the perspectives of this is that this Magdala stone is in fact a miniature version not only of the temple, but it describes also the functioning of the Ark of the Covenant. So what's it doing at this synagogue in Magdala, which is Mary Magdala's hometown, and is also a synagogue where it's believed that Jesus probably even preached? What caught my attention about the Magdala stone are the wheels on one of the sides of the stone. These wheels are considered to be the ox cart that the Ark of the Covenant was carried upon, or something perhaps even more provocative. These wheels that we see on the side of the Magdala stone are thought to be representations of the wheels within wheels of Ezekiel's throne vision. 600 years before the time of Jesus, Ezekiel is in Babylon. He's a high priest of the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. He's been exiled to Babylon. He's along the river Chebar in Babylon. The heavens open and he sees a chariot of the gods with a figure enfolded within rainbow light, enthroned on this chariot. This is Ezekiel's chariot of fire that is being described here. And as we go forward, what I discovered is that in the earliest Christian depictions of the Ascension Throne of Christ, we see Ezekiel's wheels, the wheels within wheels. This is drawing a direct line between the Ascension Throne of Christ in the 1st century AD and Ezekiel's rainbow throne from the 6th century BC. And in between, we see the Magdala Stone from the synagogue in Mary Magdalene's hometown featuring exactly those same wheels. What that means to me is that what we're actually looking at here is a model of the Ascension Throne of Christ, which in Jewish mysticism they refer to as the Merkabah, the cab of God. This is the ascension vehicle, the interdimensional vehicle, we would call it today, of the ascended beings. Ezekiel knew all about this, and most certainly, based on what we're seeing here, on the left-hand side, you see the earliest depiction of the Ascension of Christ. This is 4th century AD from Egypt. It's now in the Coptic Museum in Cairo. But you can see that Christ is sitting on a throne with his feet on a footstool, with Ezekiel's wheels on either side of the exterior of this magic bubble, referred to as a cloud in the book of Acts, that he's ascending upon. And we can see that it is exactly the same symbolism as the Magdala Stone. What this means is that this Magdala Stone, if Jesus taught from it, he is teaching Merkabah mysticism. He is teaching ascension mysticism, and he's using this stone to explain this whole process of how a human can sit on an ascension throne such as this and be transported into other realms. On one side of the stone is a depiction of the Holy of Holies, as I said, the inner sanctum of Solomon's temple, complete with a portion of a Merkabah chariot, God's wheels within wheels. This is the Ascension Throne of Christ, and there is nothing like it anywhere else in Israel or the ancient world until the 4th century, when in Egypt we see the first depiction of the Ascension of Christ. Some believe that Jesus was actually killed for teaching the Merkabah mysteries. These were forbidden mysteries that were accumulated by the Essenes beginning in the 3rd century BC. It's all about human transformation into a celestial being, with the Merkabah throne encoding the symbolism for this human transformation. Scholars believe Jesus may have taught these mysteries in the Magdala synagogue from this stone. Let's think about that for a second. Jesus' hands could well have been on this stone. And think about what the archaeologist said when she said, this stone has power. Yeah, you better believe it. It's like infused with this frequency within it. And also of great interest to scholars examining the stone is the large seed of life or flower of life rosette on the top side of the stone, consisting of 6 petals surrounded by a flower. And so what we have here is a link to many of the ascension mysteries in the ancient world. This symbol is found in ancient China. It's found in the Temple of Seti at Abydos. It's found all over the world, and it represents first the seed of life, then the flower of life, and our ability to unfold as beings into higher dimensional beings. Again, the back of the stone depicts a pillared structure with wheels, with 2 wheels above a geometric shape. This is considered to be Ezekiel's wheels. This is the Holy of Holies of Solomon's temple, but we now know what is actually happening here is that whole idea of Ezekiel's ascension throne has now been mapped onto the ascension throne of Christ. This is the original teaching of Christianity that suddenly came out of the ground in 2009 in Magdala. And so this is uniquely important among Christian artifacts. Again, unique in all of Israel. And what it does for me is it suggests that if Mary Magdalene is Jesus' chief apostle, which she was, if she's from Magdala, it opens up a line of, I think, reasonable speculation that she was there while he is teaching these Merkabah mysteries in her home synagogue. Or what if that's possible? What if, as the chief apostle, Magdalene is actually schooled in the understanding of how this ascension throne works and its connection to this remarkable stone discovered in Magdala. Well, let's look at a couple of other examples of the Ascension Throne of Christ, because the book of Acts tells us that Jesus ascended in a cloud, which is what is represented here, and he will return the same way that he left, upon this cloud, which is actually this Ascension Throne. What we're looking at here is an illumination from the 6th century Syrian manuscript called the Rabbanu Gospels. It's the second oldest depiction of the Ascension of Christ. 4th century Egypt, the one we've been looking at and studying. Now this one's 6th century from Syria. As art historians note, a great many, in fact, nearly all of the Western Ascension images adopt the pattern seen in this Syrian image from the Rabbanu Gospels. This became the common way of portraying this event. And what do we see? We see Jesus enfolded within a rainbow, being held aloft by Ezekiel's wheels. This is Ezekiel's ascension chariot. It is exactly what is modeled by the Magdala Stone, giving us concrete, literally written in stone evidence that the Ascension Throne of Christ is indeed connected to Ezekiel's chariot, the Ascension Throne of God. So along with her vessel of anointing oil, Mary Magdalene is believed to have possessed a mystical teaching of the Spirit or divine love power that her anointing conveyed. And visionary prophets such as Ezekiel and the mystical Essenes conceived this divine power as the chariot. So what that means is that the mysteries of Mary Magdalene's anointing oil are all tied up with Ezekiel's chariot. And the divine chariot of Ezekiel was nothing other than the throne of God, which Moses had previously seen, and others have described this mystical chariot of fire. Elijah went up into the heavens in one of these chariots of fire in the 8th century BC, 200 years before Ezekiel, 800 years before the time of Jesus. And what they are saying is that Mary Magdalene's oil, her mysterious oil contained in that alabaster jar, is somehow wrapped up with the mysteries of this chariot. So what we're trying to piece together here is what exactly was transpiring in this synagogue in Magdala. What actually was Jesus teaching? Because what he was teaching was actually original Christianity, which has nothing to do these days with Merkabah mysticism and the celestial chariot of Ezekiel or Elijah or even the ascension chariot of Christ. Nor does traditional modern day Christianity delve in any way, in my opinion, that I've seen, into the mysteries of the ascension oil of Mary Magdalene. And they certainly don't connect that oil with this chariot. But with our understanding of the psychedelic and theogenic nature of this oil that I've discussed in my book, The Psychedelic Christ, we have to be open to the possibility that what's happening here is that Magdalene's oil, placed on top of the eyes, most likely, somehow enhanced the vision of the people attending that synagogue, or perhaps others that were studying the Merkabah mysteries. And it enabled them to open their aperture, to widen their perspective, their spiritual vision, so that perhaps they could better understand or see the mysteries of the Ezekiel's chariot and the Ascension Throne represented by the Magdala Stone. Because, of course, at the time that Jesus would have been teaching this in the synagogue at Magdala, perhaps again with Mary Magdalene beside him, they wouldn't have called it the Ascension Throne of Christ. They would have probably just called it the Merkabah mysteries. Later history, we look back and recognize that there was an ascension throne that was involved. Here's how Ezekiel's throne chariot is described. Above the firmament over their heads was the likeness of a throne and the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above it. So this is Ezekiel describing his vision of this throne. Also, from the appearance of his waist and upwards, I saw as it were the color of amber with the appearance of fire all around and within it. And from the appearance of his waist and downward, I saw as it were the appearance of fire with brightness all around. He's describing a being with fire, frequency, vibration, or perhaps plasma all around his body. And then he says that the appearance of the brilliant light all around him was like that of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. Now, something that is so vital to note here is that the Ezekiel priesthood was based at Magdala. Magdala was a center of Merkabah mysteries for centuries before Mary Magdalene was born there and before Jesus taught there in the synagogue. And it focuses on this luminous, radiant, rainbow-colored being sitting on this throne chariot, which is the Ark of the Covenant. He's sitting on a throne with his feet on a footstool with Ezekiel's wheels. That is the original Ark of the Covenant. And so Jesus is coaching the disciples that at the time of his own resurrection and ascension, he too is going to take on this rainbow hue, this plasma state of being. And they might see him, as Ezekiel did, as this rainbow enfolded figure sitting on this throne, ascending and descending with the wheels all around. This is the fundamental tenet of Merkabah mysticism. And the reason why people study Merkabah mysticism is in hopes that they will one day also be able to take this ride upon this chariot. And so when we're seeing Ezekiel's wheels on the Merkabah throne, the Magdala Stone, we are connecting to a vastly ancient mystery. It must precede Ezekiel perhaps by thousands of years, because his rainbow throne is matched by what we see in ancient Samaria as well. So we're talking about a method of cosmic conveyance here, an ascension vehicle. And this is, again, what is largely lost by contemporary or modern Christianity. But even up until the 16th century, when they would portray the ascension of Christ, he's sitting on a throne wearing a star cloak with Ezekiel's wheels at his feet. That is the Merkabah throne. That is the Merkabah throne of the Magdala Stone. And again, to repeat, 2009, mysteriously, suddenly, spontaneously evidence that Jesus was teaching these mysteries and Magdala comes out of the ground. It's practically a miracle. And I don't think it's any coincidence that it happened at this time when we are experiencing this resurgence of Magdalene mysteries. I had an opportunity to study this Magdala Stone up close in person at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. It was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls exhibition. Everyone is focused on the Dead Sea Scrolls, magnificent, but I'm over here just completely locked onto the power coming off this stone and wondering with great mystery, is it possible that this was Jesus's personal property? Did he commission this unique, one and only stone and had it brought out to Magdala, the home of his beloved, Mary Magdalene? It's speculative, but well within the realm of possibility. And so I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time just trying to connect with this stone and link the Magdalene mysteries to it. And the idea here is that it's not only emitting frequencies and vibration, but decoding the mysteries of the stone actually put us right in line with exactly what Jesus and Mary Magdalene would have been teaching in the synagogue at Magdala. And this is now the challenge for all modern day Magdalene followers, those who embrace the frequency, the archetype, the teachings of the Magdalene, must pour their attention into this stone, absorb its mysteries, receive its vibration, and begin to embody this teaching, because it's as close, I believe, as anything that we're ever going to get to what they were actually all about. Now, I'm showing you here this painting. It's the Annunciation by Leonardo da Vinci. And it's fascinating to me because, of course, this is the Archangel Gabriel appearing to the Mother Mary, and she's sitting before an altar. And when I look at this altar, I see some striking similarities with the Magdala Stone. We see the scallop shell of the Divine Feminine. We see these kind of curly wheels on it. we very clearly see the Mother Mary teaching from this stone. And it gets to the point where you wonder, is Da Vinci telling us that this isn't actually the Mother Mary that is teaching from this stone? That in fact it's actually Mary Magdalene? Again, it's speculative, but it resonates. And it makes me wonder, once again, if all of the Marys, the Miraphors, the Mother Mary, Mary Salome, Mary Magdalene, were actually trained in these Merkabah mysteries. I feel quite certain that they were. And remember, the Miraphors were the ones who were responsible for creating that oil in Mary Magdalene's alabaster jar that we're told was connected with the chariot. So they go together. Mary Magdalene's oil and the Merkabah throne operate together, and together they create what we can think of as the chariot for our consciousness. It elevates our consciousness, it elevates our being, it plugs us into the mysteries of Mary Magdalene. So my sense is that the real Da Vinci Code is not a bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, as important as that would be, but rather the real Da Vinci Code is Leonardo's understanding somehow. I think he might have intuited, or perhaps even saw, maybe in a visionary state, the actual Magdala Stone and encoded the mysteries of it within this Annunciation painting. So take it or leave it. Is the Magdala Stone the actual Grail stone? We know that Mary Magdalene took possession of the Grail, at least according to Grail lore. She brought it to southern France with her, and it's thought to be a bloodline. But the Grail is also thought of as a cup. It's thought of as a cup. It's thought of as a bloodline. It's also thought of as a stone that fell from Lucifer's crown, granted. But here is a stone that encodes all of the Grail mysteries. And again, it makes me wonder, is this the actual Grail, the original Grail stone, the one infused with the frequency and the vibration and the teachings of Christ that Mary Magdalene was able to master? Is it a miniature, not only of Solomon's temple, but also actually a miniature of the Ark of the Covenant, the throne and footstool of God, the Ascension Throne and footstool of God, that would one day, we're told, be recovered and would be instrumental in the reappearance of the Christ at the time of the second coming? Is it possible that somehow this stone serves a function related not only to the Merkabah mysteries and the Magdalene mysteries, but also the mysteries of the second coming? This is what we're feeling our way around here. And now here's where we need to make a little bit of a leap or put some linkages together. Let's say this stone does represent the Ark of the Covenant, that this is the Merkabah throne, the Ark throne. This is the Ascension Throne that Ezekiel saw. This is the Ascension Throne of Christ. That is the function that the original Ark of the Covenant fulfilled as well. From my other presentations, you know that the Ark of the Covenant, as we typically think about it today, is a golden box that contained maybe some tablets, or maybe it contained radioactive material. It could have been a capacitor. It could have some technological function, but it's typically thought of as exclusively holding only the tablets. But we know that originally the Ark of the Covenant had additional tools or implements that were included within it, components. The flask of manna, the hallucinogenic star food, a rod of Aaron, a rod that could perform miracles, a jar containing anointing oil, maybe the same anointing oil as Mary Magdalene. And that when all of these components are assembled, in other words, when you open the golden box of the Ark of the Covenant, take out the components and assemble them, what we get is called the Etimasia, the throne of Christ, the Ascension Throne of Christ. They are the same thing. So if the Magdala Stone is representative of the Holy of Holies of Solomon's Temple, and by extension is in fact modeling the Ark of the Covenant, then when Jesus is teaching from this stone at Magdala, he's actually telling us about his own Ascension Throne, the Etimasia. The Etimasia is depicted as having an ark-like platform with a footstool. And again, that's the qualification telling us it's the Ark of the Covenant, which is the footstool of God. It also includes a cross, which is equivalent to the rod of Aaron. It's an instrument of transmutation, a spear, a sponge, a book, which is considered to be the book of life or the book of love, a robe of light, a garment or a robe of light, and again, a jar containing sacred oil. These are all of the components of the original Ark of the Covenant and perfectly match the components of the Etimasia, the Ascension Throne of Christ. This throne, according to the research I wrote about in my book, The Judgment Day Device, were assembled before the time of the crucifixion. Jesus' little brother James was the one who went and assembled all of these tools and implements. And then after the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, this throne is disassembled and then hidden away. And the prophecy then becomes that it will be reassembled at the time of the second coming. So it's lost, it's taken away, but it will return, and it will be returned ultimately to the site of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. So beginning especially through the 6th century, these are some of the earliest depictions of the Etimasia that I've ever collected. They start to tell us about this actual throne of Christ that is his property. It belongs to him, and it's involved in his ascension. And the symbolism of this throne matches what we see in the Magdala Stone. Then around the 16th century, we start to see depictions such as this, where Christ is hovering above in the cloud, in his ascension cloud, some sort of interdimensional transportation vehicle. And beneath him, beneath the cloud, we see Ezekiel's wheels. That is telling us that there's a direct connection between the ascension cloud of Christ and the wheels of the Magdala Stone. And beneath the cloud is the Etimasia. It's the Ascension Throne of Christ, the fully assembled parts or components of the Ark of the Covenant. And who is it that is responsible for operating, quote unquote, operating this device? It's John the Baptist and it's Mary Magdalene. It's Mary Magdalene who is responsible for tending or operating this throne while Christ hovers up above in a cloud. That tells me that what's happening here is that Mary Magdalene is intimately aware of the mysteries of Merkabah mysticism and also the ascension throne of her husband, the Christ. And it furthermore tells me that she must understand what the actual Ark of the Covenant was and is. And if there is to be a second coming, it furthermore suggests to me, at least by these indications of this artwork, that Mary Magdalene will be involved perhaps in the recovery of this throne, perhaps in the reassembly of this throne, perhaps in the fundamental operation of this throne, which is absolutely fundamental to the event we refer to as the second coming. What we're looking at here is another Russian depiction of Judgment Day, the second coming. And what we see is this multi-tiered reality or levels of creation with Christ up above in his magic bubble with Ezekiel's wheels at his feet. And just one layer beneath him, right at his feet, is the Etimasia. This is his throne. This is his property. That's why it's there. There's a serpent that runs its way from the higher layers of creation down into the earth plane. And that serpent is referred to literally by academics as a cosmic toll booth. There are 19 to 21 rings on the body of this serpent, and those rings are described as cosmic toll booths. What we're asked to believe here is that this is an image conveying Christ's journey into higher dimensions, but it's also conveying his return from higher dimensions, stepping down in frequency onto the earth plane. And the Etimasia is directly involved in this transfer from one layer of creation to another. In the detail here, we are seeing Christ in his magic bubble, his cloud as it's called. I prefer to call it the magic bubble. And he's got Ezekiel's wheels at his feet, indicating he's on the Merkabah throne. And on either side of the magic bubble, once again, are John the Baptist and Mary Magdalene. They are directly and intimately involved in this process, in this act of returning the Christ to the earth plane, or today we speak more in terms of Christ consciousness. So now let's think about this again in the context of what we've been discussing here, that we're seeing for the past 30 years a tremendous resurgence in Magdalene mysteries. We're seeing all around the planet, beginning around 1996 into the early 2000s, women all over the world embracing the consciousness, the frequency, the vibration of the Magdalene. Why? Why now? Is it possible, again, that this tsunami of interest among just not thousands or tens of thousands, but perhaps hundreds of thousands of women all around the world are embracing the frequency of the Magdalene now because something is about to unfold relative to what we think of as the second coming of a Christ or Messiah? And if that's the case, then what is the role of the modern Magdalene? What is the role of those embracing the Magdalene archetype? Well, in my view, the role is to recover the Merkabah mysteries, to recover the throne chariot mysteries, to recover the Etimasia, to recover the Etimasia itself, and to understand those mysteries and how the divine feminine provides the counterbalance to the masculine, and being able to bring this advanced what is an interdimensional teaching back to earth. And I find it fascinating that this resurgence in the Magdalene frequency is happening at exactly the same time that we have an unfolding disclosure movement on our planet. And I've had numerous conversations with my friend Dr. Travis Taylor about Christ and his magic bubble, in his ascension bubble, and how that maps onto the videos that F-18 pilots have taken up the coast of Florida and Escondido, California, depicting what are referred to as the Tic Tac, this glowing orb that is creating just absolute wonder, magic, and mystery in the disclosure community, because this Tic Tac craft is able to do things. We're watching this video now of the Navy pilots chasing the Tic Tac.
No, I don't have trick right. Okay. Oh, John.
I wanted you to specifically hear the absolute ecstasy that these pilots are experiencing as they're chasing this Tic Tac, this craft. They've seen it go from 80,000 feet to just 3 feet above the water. They've seen it travel 80 miles in just a few seconds or so, doing impossible things. And it was my friend, again, Dr. Travis Taylor, who did the original decoding of this video. The publicly acknowledged information about this video fills up about one page. Travis's original report was 250 pages. The rest of it's classified. But when this video was released in 2017, it did something very profound. It said, disclosure is on. It's real. The U.S. government definitely has evidence of advanced craft. And when Travis did the analysis of this, he said some very interesting things. He said that the Go Fast video and the Tic Tac show a halo around the craft in these videos that is very cold inside, and that the sphere around the craft, while the craft is hotter, the ambient cloud layer around it is much warmer. And for some reason, there seems to be this bubble, his term, around the vehicle that looks like a vacuum, or at least much colder than the normal atmosphere in that region. Why that is, he says, he can't explain it. Travis has got multiple PhDs in this field and is most capable person of looking at this video and telling us what's going on. And he's saying, our physics can't explain it. But if you look at exotic solutions like warp bubbles, wormholes, general relativistic, anti-gravity type concepts, all these things, he says, require some kind of a magic bubble of space-time manipulation around it. And this could be, he says, a telltale sign of what we're seeing in these videos. We're looking actually at a craft that does not have a physical existence. It's as if it's popped into our reality. They wink in and out of our reality and given an indication that what we're actually seeing in these videos is a three-dimensional projection of a five-dimensional object. It's coming from a higher reality, which is why it can manipulate the physics of our layer of creation. It's not a hologram. The craft are made out of matter, but they're a projection for our three-dimensional space. We can see them in infrared. They're poking into our universe. We can bounce radar off them. We can photograph them. However, they may not actually be there in the sense that we could crash into them. We may be looking at craft that are actually emerging from a wormhole. And then the question is, if these craft, these Tic Tac craft, are a projection, where are they coming from? Well, in many conversations with Travis, I have extrapolated the imagery of the magic bubble of Christ hovering above his ascension throne and compared it to what we're looking at in the Tic Tac video. And the overlap is not only surprising, it's telling us what the ancients were probably actually asking us to understand about Christ in his resurrected form. Remember, when Mary Magdalene encounters Christ in the garden, he says, "Do not touch me." And there's been a long stream of thought that says the reason he said that is because he's not actually in a physical flesh and blood form any longer. He's in his resurrection body, his light body, which is a projection from a higher layer of creation that he had ascended to, and is a projection strikingly similar to what we are discussing with the Tic Tac videos. What if that was the case? What if that is the case? What that is telling us is something very important about the ascension cloud, the magic bubble of Christ, and its connection to Ezekiel's wheels and the Magdala Stone. What it's telling us is that we have been primed for the past 4 millennia to arrive at this exact moment in time where we understand the interdimensional nature of the Christ revolution and his resurrection and ascension. And what I'm suggesting to us here, especially those on the Magdalene path or the Mary path, is that this is the direction we want to focus our energy and our emotion and our study. If we are wanting to fully embrace the Magdalene frequency and archetype in our time, we've got to understand more fully what's going on with those Tic Tac videos. We've got to more fully understand the relationship between the Etimasia, the Ascension Throne of Christ, and the Ark of the Covenant as some kind of interdimensional technology. Flat out. That is what we are dealing with here. And in this example here, we're looking at a 15th century example of Christ in his Merkabah throne, his Merkabah bubble, the space-time light vehicle held aloft by angels, and above him is the Etimasia, the throne of Christ. And as usual, who are the two figures that are shown tending and operating this device? Well, on the left, it's John the Baptist, and on the right, it's Mary Magdalene. So I'm putting this out, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. If you have not gone down the Etimasia path and understood Mary Magdalene's connection to these Merkabah mysteries and to this throne, and understanding once again that this is the actual original Ark of the Covenant reassembled, that this is the line you want to now be following. We want to more fully understand the Ark of the Covenant, the Etimasia as an interdimensional device. We want to look at Mary Magdalene's oil as somehow a component of this throne, that it expands our consciousness, widens the aperture, if you will. And this is the reason why that oil is included in the list of components of the original Ark of the Covenant and the Etimasia throne of Christ. I believe that what this is saying transcends anything we have previously really understood about Mary Magdalene and John the Baptist. It elevates them into these Merkabah masters. And I can only wonder what else might be there in Magdala for us to discover. I mean, if this stone miraculously comes out of the ground in 2009, maybe some of her oil is there too. What if? Maybe some of the other components of the Etimasia are there as well. They're scattered around. They're awaiting assembly. And once again, my invitation to those on the Magdalene Trail is to recognize that Magdalene's knowledge focuses on the oil in particular, specifically the oil of the throne, of the Etimasia, of the Merkabah stone. One normally doesn't think of Jesus or his family or even his brothers, especially as purveyors or blenders of entheogenic or psychedelic oils, but I made that case in the Psychedelic Christ. One of the powers that Christ gave to his disciples was the ability to cure every kind of disease and infirmity. And according to the Gospel of Mark, these acts were accompanied by an anointing oil. That is the oil of Mary Magdalene. That is the oil that is part of the Etimasia throne of Christ. And it's inferred in all of these mysteries. And once again, what I'm asking those on the Magdalene Trail to embrace is this idea that Magdalene was actually the one who tended the Merkabah mystery. She tended this throne, and she will return with that knowledge, if not herself, then certainly representatives of her who possess this knowledge. And so, in conclusion here, this throne is out there. They call it the Etimasia, which means the prepared throne of Christ. In other words, it's there waiting in preparation for the second coming. But Christ is not visibly seated upon that throne. And part of the mystery is that throne is already here, but the occupant has not yet appeared. And what this means is that we have to prepare ourselves, prepare our own throne as a vessel to perceive this being and to understand these mysteries. And it begins with understanding the mysteries of the Etimasia. And as I have said a couple of times, I believe that the Magdala Stone is a teaching stone utilized by Jesus to discuss his ascension throne and ultimately the mysteries of his ascension. What that means is that this is a profoundly initiatory symbol, as is the Etimasia. In fact, again, they could well be the same thing. And now humanity awaits revelation. It waits the revelation of the mysteries of this throne. And that is our job now. All of us involved in the Magdalene mysteries is to lock on to the mysteries of this throne and reveal its innermost secrets. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation today. I'll look forward to speaking with you next time.